Uranus is the most electric and unstable of all the planetary archetypes. It operates outside of rhythm, beyond tradition, and often in defiance of control. Where Saturn is structure, Uranus is rupture. Where Saturn values time, Uranus brings the shock of the timeless now. Uranus represents revolt, genius, innovation, and awakening. It governs the need to break away from restriction and to individuate from the collective. But it is also a planet of paradox. It brings chaos and clarity, disruption and truth, distance and revelation, often all at once. To understand Uranus is to explore the instinct toward radical autonomy. It is the energy within the psyche that refuses domestication, that resists being molded by external norms, and that insists on operating according to its own truth. This episode is a psychological and symbolic deep dive into Uranus, the planet of quantum insight, evolutionary tension, and nonconformist intelligence. At its core, Uranus represents the drive to individuate, to become a singular, authentic self apart from collective conditioning. Uranus asks, "Who are you when no one is watching? What part of you refuses to fit in? What truth burns underneath the roles you perform?" Uranus energy often begins with rejection, either feeling rejected or rejecting what has been given. This rupture is not just personal, it is archetypal. The Uranian path involves tearing away from old structures, beliefs, and identities in order to live from a more liberated self-concept. But this is not narcissism or egoism. It is a deep existential urge to live truthfully, without compromise or imitation. Uranus is the planetary principle of disruption. It governs the moments in life when systems break, when expectations are overturned, and when certainty collapses. Psychologically, Uranus disruptions often manifest as sudden insights or awakenings, breakups or departures, shifts in identity or ideology, refusals to comply with social scripts. These disruptions are rarely comfortable, but they are rarely meaningless. Uranus does not disrupt for the sake of chaos, it disrupts to reveal what is false, stagnant, or oppressive. The Uranian psyche lives close to the edge. It knows that stability is sometimes an illusion, and it is willing to sacrifice comfort for authenticity. Uranus rules freedom, but not freedom in the consumerist sense. Not freedom as indulgence. Uranian freedom is existential. It is the freedom to think differently, speak against consensus, change one's life radically, invent a new way of being. This kind of freedom is not always granted. Often it must be claimed, wrestled from systems, expectations, and even internal fears. The Uranian path demands risk. It means saying no when others say yes. It means standing alone when truth requires it. It means enduring instability in order to live authentically. And yet, paradoxically, Uranian freedom is not lawless. It is governed by internal principle, a deep and sometimes mysterious moral code rooted in the self, not in external authority. More than any other planet, Uranus is associated with awakening, sudden insight that ruptures old ways of thinking and living. This awakening can be intellectual, political, psychological, spiritual. Uranus does not unfold gradually. It strikes. It downloads. It seizes consciousness and shatters assumptions. In this way, it resembles lightning, unpredictable, forceful, and often illuminating. The Uranian mind operates on an accelerated frequency. It doesn't always explain itself, but it sees what others miss. It breaks out of linear logic and taps into visionary perception. This can feel disorienting, especially for a society that prizes conformity and predictability. But Uranus insists that awakening is necessary, not for rebellion's sake, but for evolution. Uranus governs the archetype of the outsider, the one who cannot or will not conform. This can manifest as the rebel, the eccentric, the genius, the exile. These are not roles taken lightly. Often, they are imposed by circumstance. The Uranian individual may feel alienated early in life, not out of arrogance, but because they genuinely perceive or function differently. Over time, this alienation can mature into radical originality. Uranus teaches that not belonging can become a source of power. That truth does not always align with consensus. That some lives are meant to invent paths, not follow them. But this path is not easy. It often includes loneliness, rejection, and periods of instability. Uranus asks, are you willing to be alone in order to be free? Uranus is also associated with technology, innovation, and the future. It governs the human drive to move beyond biological and traditional limits through tools, systems, and inventions. Psychologically, this includes abstract thinking, symbolic logic, experimental problem-solving, post-conventional worldviews. Uranus energy often appears in people with a passion for futurism, science fiction, AI and digital systems, revolutionary design or engineering. But even beyond literal technology, Uranus symbolizes mental acceleration. It is the part of the psyche that is always thinking ahead, always seeking to invent, revise, or transcend. This can be overwhelming. But it also leads to brilliance. Uranus is the future embedded in the now. Unlike the emotionally immersive archetypes of the Moon or Neptune, Uranus governs detachment, the ability to observe rather than absorb. This can be a source of objectivity, a form of psychological protection, a result of trauma or shock, a way to maintain autonomy. Healthy Uranian detachment creates clarity. It allows for precision, insight, and calm under pressure. It enables one to disrupt systems without being consumed by them. But in excess, Uranian detachment can become emotional coldness, disconnection from the body, intellectual superiority, difficulty forming bonds. The key is balance, to stay connected without being controlled. Uranus teaches, love must be free to be real. Although Uranus drives personal individuation, it also governs collective shifts. It speaks to mass movements, sudden social changes, and the evolution of humanity. This includes revolutions and uprisings, breakthroughs in science or culture, shifts in collective identity, decentralized networks and systems. Uranus speaks in synchronicity, the right idea at the right time. The Internet, civil rights, cryptocurrencies, and social uprisings all carry Uranian fingerprints. As individuals, we may be carriers of Uranian energy. We feel the need to update the collective software, to interrupt systems that no longer serve. Uranus whispers, if the future is to be free, someone must say what no one wants to hear. Uranus operates through shock, not to punish, but to awaken. It destabilizes illusions so that new consciousness can emerge. Psychologically, Uranus shocks can take the form of sudden career changes, breakups or separations, personal revolutions, unexplainable intuition or knowledge. These experiences are not always comfortable, but they are often necessary ruptures, timed perfectly by the unconscious psyche to dismantle what is false. Shock is not random. It is sacred disruption. Uranus shocks the ego in order to free the deeper self. The question becomes, can you allow the ground to fall away in order to find your sky? The Uranian shadow emerges when the drive for freedom becomes compulsive, arrogant, or alienating. This can manifest as rebellion for its own sake, chronic instability, emotional avoidance, intellectual superiority, Fear of intimacy. In its shadow form, Uranus detaches too early, breaks too often, and trusts no one. It seeks liberation without reflection, freedom without direction. The healing of Uranus involves anchoring the lightning, grounding insight, accepting human limits, and forming authentic relationships without losing selfhood. Uranus is not asking us to be wild. It is asking us to be awake. Uranus governs the archetype of the genius, not necessarily in IQ or fame, but in the psychological sense of original, non-derivative thought. Uranian genius includes pattern recognition, visionary ideas, bold experimentation, cross-disciplinary thinking. It is not always appreciated in real time. Uranian thinkers are often ahead of their era, misunderstood, dismissed, or ridiculed. But over time, their work becomes the foundation of new systems. Uranus teaches, truth does not need to be popular to be valid. This kind of genius requires solitude, courage, and detachment from approval. It is born not of ego, but of alignment with a larger evolutionary pulse. Ultimately, Uranus represents a mode of consciousness, a way of living with the eyes open. Awakened living means questioning assumptions, acting from authenticity, living outside of fear, trusting intuition, refusing to numb out. It is not easy. It requires constant recalibration. But it also brings a rare quality of aliveness, a sense that each moment is original, unrepeatable, and fully yours. Uranus does not offer security. It offers truth. Uranus is the planetary function of liberation. It breaks what is dead in order to make space for what is real. It speaks the language of insight, innovation, defiance, and vision. It teaches that change is necessary. Freedom is sacred. Truth is disruptive. The future begins now. Uranus is not safe, but it is necessary. It is the shock that awakens, the break that heals, the spark that sets consciousness on fire. It does not ask you to conform. It asks you to awaken.